Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're looking at a fascinating, highly consequential debate playing out right now regarding the cybersecurity of Japan's power grid. We're drawing from a rigorous analysis by the cybersecurity experts at IS3. They're basically dissecting the government's proposed JC Star policy, which is their response to those May 2024 solar grid cyber attacks. What we're looking at here is a classic showdown between two fundamentally different ways of thinking about our critical infrastructure.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the grid security dilemma. Second, the limits of product certification. Third, we'll look at the duty of care alternative. Fourth, the 9 rules for system defense. Fifth, a future-proof strategy. And finally, number 6, the hybrid compromise.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the grid security dilemma, or, as the source material frames it, the illusion of security.
To really grasp this, think about it this way. Imagine you buy the absolute most expensive, high-end lock for your front door, but you leave all your ground floor windows wide open. Is your house secure? Well, obviously not, right? Product certification, which is the core mechanism of the government's JC Star mandate, is essentially that expensive front door lock. But the overall network configuration, those are the windows. If you connect a perfectly certified device using dangerous settings, or you just leave it exposed directly to the open internet, an attacker isn't going to bother picking the lock. They'll just climb right through the open window.
And that brings us to this absolutely crucial paradigm shift highlighted in the analysis. Trust no product, verify the configuration. It's all about moving away from blindly trusting a sticker on a box or trusting the origin of a specific piece of hardware. Let's be real, in a world where any single product can eventually be compromised by a zero-day exploit or a supply chain attack, just trusting a label is actually a vulnerability in itself. The focus really has to be on verifying the actual system architecture.
Moving right along to Section 2, the limits of product certification, and specifically, let's dissect the blind spots. The crucial contrast to understand here is time. A product certification like JC Star is really just a snapshot. It proves that a device was secure on a test bench on, say, a specific Tuesday. But it can't account for dangerous setup installed on a Wednesday, or future software vulnerabilities discovered next month, or even a compromised patch downloaded next year. A system-level focus, on the other hand, is continuous. It demands this dynamic architectural defense that stays resilient even if one specific component inside the network is eventually breached.
To make this super concrete, let's look at this actual bypass route detailed in the documents. Imagine a solar facility goes out and buys a perfectly certified, very expensive power conditioning system, but the attacker doesn't even bother attacking that system directly. Step 1, they hack an uncertified, cheap, generic PC sitting on the exact same network. Step 2, they literally use a basic standard RS-485 serial cable to bridge that cheap PC right over to the expensive certified equipment. Step 3, they use the generic PC's LTE connection to phone home to the internet. It's totally ironic when you think about it. You've got this highly sophisticated, certified defense completely bypassed by a cheap serial cable. That expensive security sticker did absolutely nothing to stop the attack.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the duty of care alternative, and this whole shift towards system defense.
So how do we solve this exact vulnerability? Well, the source material introduces an alternative paradigm called the minimum duty of care system. Instead of demanding perfect products from manufacturers, this framework mandates that grid operators simply exercise responsible connection practices. It focuses intensely on how devices are wired together, it ensures strong boundary protection, and maintains safe configurations. It essentially assumes that any device could eventually be compromised and asks one vital question: how do we limit the blast radius? Let's look at the specifics in Section 4, the 9 rules for system defense, ranging from D1 to D9.
Now, I know 9 rules sounds like a lot, but the brilliance of this approach is how it targets the actual attack routes, rather than just listing off device specs. It demands separating the power generation network from general business networks. It sets up a firm boundary firewall, physically controlling the direction of communication so outside traffic just can't sneak in. It aggressively restricts remote access with encryption and multi-factor authentication. It forces immediate changes to default passwords and mandates strict logging, regular updates, and keeping a clear map of the network. You can clearly see how this comprehensively blocks those open windows we talked about earlier, rather than just checking the lock on the front door.
Now, you might be wondering, okay, but isn't this way too much paperwork for a simple, small rooftop solar panel? Actually, no, because the policy proportionally scales based on the actual risk.
Small, low-voltage setups, they might be excluded entirely, or maybe they just face basic password rules. High-voltage industrial sites, however, have to implement the full 9 rules. And massive, extra high-voltage critical infrastructure adds 24/7 active monitoring to the whole shebang.
Moving right along to Section 5, a future-proof strategy, looking at the geopolitics and innovation side of things.
Stepping back from just the technical fixes for a second, the strategic arguments presented here are incredibly persuasive. First off, it fosters massive innovation. Think about it. A product certification mandate forces startups to spend huge amounts of time and money getting labels before they can even run a test on the grid. But the duty of care approach, it basically says, hey, we don't care what brand new experimental battery or virtual power plant software you're using, as long as you connect it safely behind a secure boundary. Because it focuses on the connection method, it absolutely refuses to stifle new energy business models.
Second, and this is huge, it neatly avoids geopolitical trade friction. If a government mandates specific national certifications, other countries might quickly label that a trade barrier and retaliate against export industries. But the duty of care approach keeps the technical standards entirely neutral. By trusting no one equally, this architecture remains incredibly resilient, no matter how global supply chains shift or international relations fluctuate.
And finally, Section 6, the hybrid compromise. Let's look at how they find the middle ground.
Here's the kicker. This proposal isn't demanding we just tear down the government's existing JSTARS policy. Instead, it offers a highly logical compromise known as deemed compliance. It's basically the ultimate carrot instead of a stick. Here's how it plays out. The core baseline requirement to connect to the grid becomes those 9 duty of care rules. However, if a developer actively chooses to buy a JSTAR certified product, they automatically satisfy certain rules, like default setting changes and update management, without having to file all that extra paperwork. It's like a fast pass lane for compliance.
This synthesizes the best of both worlds, really. The government gets to use its certification program as a positive incentive. The operators keep their freedom to innovate without being totally crushed by red tape. And most importantly, the grid receives continuous architectural defense against modern cyber threats. It's a masterclass in pragmatic policy design that actually grounds itself in real-world engineering realities.
So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on regarding the future of our critical infrastructure. When the lights go out, does the hacker care about the regulatory sticker on the hardware? Absolutely not. So would you rather trust a static label on a box or the continuous, verified architecture of the system actively protecting your power grid? Thanks so much for exploring this explainer with us today, and keep asking the big questions.